Hello, everyone. My name is Stuart DeQ. I'm the Executive Director of the Yale Center for Business and the Environment, which is a joint initiative between the School of Management and the School of the Environment, kind of hub and home for environmental innovation on campus, and the administrative home and sort of the hub for the joint degree community. I'm a joint degree myself. As you can see in our names, you can see our graduated year. I'm like a 14th year joint degree now because I graduated the program in 2011. And then we've got three lovely panelists who are going to talk to you about their experience, their path through the joint degree, what they're working on, what they're hoping to do with it, how they've navigated the place, what they think about New Haven, how they're engaging with the community overall. So we've got Charlotte, who is graduating this year from the joint degree program. We got Grace, who's in her second year, and Colin, who is also in his second year. And we're going to spend the bulk of the time there on their experience and taking your questions at the end of that. I'm going to provide a brief overview and to give you a sense of the history of the program, the way that people go through it, and just a few thoughts before we get started. So I'm just going to share my screen briefly here. So a little bit of background on the joint degree itself. So Yale was the first place where in the US you established a school of environmental science, right? The best sort of science from forestry, particularly from the German Forest Service, was brought over and established in the United States for kind of the long-term preservation enhancement of natural resources. And it's really got a kind of incredible history of innovation and engagement and pulling in lots of smart, creative people over periods of time. And then at a certain point in time, Yale founded one of the last major management school in the United States, which the Yale School of Management was founded in the late 70s. And right after that happened, the students who were at both schools looked at the kind of mission of leaders for business and society and people who wanted to preserve and protect ecosystems and natural resources for communities long term, and knocked on doors between the two and said, we should be able to combine these as a degree. Like, this should exist. So the kind of entrepreneurial and nature and the connections and the organizing of sets of students, faculty, and others around the university established the first joint degree program of its type. And then this program has then been replicated and kind of put into place in other schools like Michigan, Duke, Stanford. Other spots have kind of then seeded these programs in and around other universities. CBay, this place that I represent, was established as a hub between the two schools, kind of continue to enhance and create more opportunity and activity between the schools and in and across Yale. And that's led to even more interdisciplinary programs, which are kind of adjacent or connected. So there's a program for executives like that have usually 15 years of experience where they get a concentration in sustainability at the School of Management. And we've also launched online programs for working professionals in financing and deploying clean energy, which kind of combine a lot of the curriculum here and serve a group that wouldn't be able to necessarily come to Yale or has already gotten a master's degree. So kind of different audiences are now connected. But the joint degree has really been the beating heart of kind of connection and innovation on the environment at Yale for a really long period of time. And people go through this program in a couple of different ways. So, you all are considering this in the admissions process. About half of the community of joint degrees starts as the folks on this screen started, all applying to both schools at the same time and then choosing which one to start at, either the School of Environment or the School of Management. And we could talk about that if you're interested in kind of how that process works. And then half actually in their first year at the School of Management or the School of the Environment end up applying to the other school and getting in. So this year we had 13 new joint degrees join the community. 6 of those were new to campus and 7 were students that crossed over from one school to the other. So you really spend 1 full year at the School of Management in the core curriculum. You have 1 dedicated year at the School of the Environment with some required curriculum, but a little bit more flexibility. And then the 3rd year, there's a common combination and kind of an ability to choose and do a lot of different things in and around. And you can kind of choose that path. And there's two orientations for the School of Management and with the School of the Environment that are separate that you'd go through between starting before your first year and in between your first and second, and then two internships that you would be doing after your first year and after your second year. You join this community of folks who have a lot of diverse interests, and usually like the class size is typically kind of anywhere between sort of 12 to 15 is where we've had most recently. And that's really where there's a healthy balance and connection in the community, where you get a lot of diversity of individuals who are doing different things and engaged in different topics and connect with each other. And so there's a lot of activity and connection between that community of sort of 30 to 45 students on campus who are in that joint degree, but then extending beyond all the other people who are interested, connected, engaged on these topics, both at the School of Management and the School of the Environment, but more broadly across Yale. And what we're going to kind of dig into is the experience of the joint degree students here today who kind of have gone through that path. And just as like a bit of context, right now, I'm going to stop the share. It's like you all are applying to this at a really interesting time. Like I applied to this program in 2007 when like we were thinking about carbon pricing was just a thing. Like there was this book that Dan Esty wrote called Green to Gold, which was about kind of corporate sustainability as an option. Like electric vehicles were like just something that people were sort of thinking about was going to be like a real thing. And now we're at an inflection point where kind of like the moral imperative to protect and enhance ecosystems and communities is really meeting the economic opportunity to be able to have real, full, engaged industries that are doing all sorts of stuff. I mean, if you look at like anybody who's thinking about buying a car, that's looking at the total cost of ownership is thinking about an electric vehicle long term. Like you've got renewables outpacing in fossil fuels in development of kind of all types of energy technology. You've got carbon markets that are being challenged but also being created at the same time. I mean, you've got a whole host of things happening here where the opportunity is just different than it was 15 years ago, and it needs lots of smart, talented, engaged people to be able to execute and embrace it and do something that helps preserve and enhance the communities, our planet, and the ecosystems we care about going forward. So really cool time for you to be thinking about this. We're glad you are. We hope to be helpful in this hour of considering and understanding it and what that looks like for people who are going through it. So we're just going to start right now with that. And I'd love for Charlotte, if you could lead off just giving us a little bit of a sense of kind of who you are, where you are coming from, kind of how you've navigated this place, and where you're going with it would be great.
Yeah, so my name is Charlotte. I'm a third year, as Stu mentioned. I was coming into this program from a bit of a non-traditional background, which is one of the reasons that Yale SOM especially appealed to me, because they really sort of like embraced that, and I felt like I wouldn't be alone in that. And so before coming to Yale, I was working in the Senate for 4 years on agricultural and environmental policy for one of the senators from Wisconsin, which is where I'm from originally. And so I was there during a really interesting time during the Trump administration when like the government wasn't able to do as much on sustainability and companies were really stepping up. And that's what got me interested in this phenomenon and kind of pursuing it as a career. So a lot of folks counseled me to get an MBA, and I was pretty firm that I wanted to do a joint degree if I was going to do an MBA. So I exclusively applied to joint programs. And that's how I found myself here. I'm particularly interested in agriculture and corporate sustainability. So that's kind of where I've organized my courses around. I've taken advantage of a lot of the flexibility that is offered in the program, kind of bouncing between both schools. And I'm taking a class at the architecture school this fall. So, but the organizing principle has kind of been corporate sustainability and agriculture.
Thank you, Charlotte. And we will, just as a quick note, as you hear things come up, please type questions into the Q&A function and we'll answer them kind of after we go through a range of things in our discussion here. Really easy to kind of sort and understand those if you put them in the Q&A rather than the chat. Colin, let's turn to you. Why did you choose this place? What are you doing with it right now? What are the kinds of things you're experimenting with in your day-to-day and in around Yale?
Sure thing. So Stu already told y'all I'm a second year as well. Before I was at Yale, I spent about 5 years living in East Africa, working for a smallholder agriculture microfinance organization, providing seed and fertilizer on credit to smallholder farmers in Eastern Uganda. Loved it. It was a dream job. I was really happy there, but kept bumping up against a couple different things. One, knew I wanted to do something at a broader scale in kind of the corner of Uganda where I was living and working. And two, realizing that as I tried to scale things up, I lacked the facility to work on bigger teams, to talk about bigger, longer term sustainability and ecological questions within agriculture, and really wanted to grapple with how do I deal with that, kind of both scale up my toolkit for working at a broader level, as well as scale up the kinds of questions that I was asking and trying to answer in my professional life. So I was looking around and originally thought I just wanted to do YSE type deal, just get an MEM degree. But as I continued to talk to students, both within the joint degree and then alumni who were looking out in the market, they kept saying, well, that MBA is going to be really helpful for a lot of the scaling up your teamwork and your toolkit questions that you're bringing to the table. So started to look at joint degree programs. In particular, I was looking at Duke, I was looking at Stanford, I was also looking at Yale. Ended up settling on Yale because the students are just really engaged in these kinds of questions and grappling with the kinds of things that I was interested in across both schools. So I started at SOM my first year and thought that was going to be all, hardcore capitalists talking about business. And it wasn't. Like, the number of student interest groups that I was involved in that were questioning these very same things that I was questioning, that were looking at the same types of things that I was looking at within agriculture and food, was surprising. And that's only continued as I've gone over to YSE. So I found myself in a community of like-minded people who were really interested in what I was interested in, and have just kind of taken it and run with it.
Cool. And can you just touch on the internship you did this summer to kind of think about that questioning process?
Yeah, so I spent the summer at Cargill, which, if you haven't heard of them, they're one of the bigger companies you've never heard of. They do food and agriculture at a very global scale. So they do everything from buying soy from Brazil to making all of Taco Bell's meat, and they assure me it's real, to making corn syrup for a lot of the sodas that you see, but also ethanol and compostable plastic utensils and asphalt additives to reduce the carbon emissions from paving roads. I mean, they do everything. So I joined their corporate sustainability team, their corporate strategy team, working on their sustainability strategy across the entire enterprise, kind of saying, one, how do we be more sustainable? But two, how do we turn that into a profitable exercise for ourselves? And learned a lot there, and would be happy to talk about that more in the Q&A section once we get there, but I don't want to take up too much of Grace's time.
Cool. Thanks, Colin. And Grace, turning to you, sort of same general questions. And then could you also just sort of begin outlining kind of like why you chose the joint degree and like the third year? Like, what about this kind of like extra time on campus really mattered to you when you were thinking about what you wanted out of a master's program?
Yeah, absolutely. So like Stu said, my name is Grace. I, like Colin, and a second year. I was in a little bit more of a traditional business background before this. I was doing energy consulting for a series of large industrial clients, verging into the finance space a little bit. And working with a lot of those private equity clients specifically, I really felt like finance was starting to move the needle on sustainability in a way that maybe the public sector or just corporate sustainability alone was not. Lenders have so much power in the market. Whether or not that's a fact that we like to accept, money drives a lot of decision making. So when you have people who are distributing capital, pushing for sustainability, it can be really, really powerful. So knew I wanted to go into finance, did not have a finance skill set coming out of college in any way. So the opposite of Colin, I was actually thinking about just going back and getting the MBA. And as I looked at MBA programs, was really struggling with sort of disconnect I felt from expertise in sustainability. and really felt like I was going to lose that environmental science and climate science part of my knowledge base. So started looking into joint degree programs, felt like that was a really good way to blend my two loves, blend the two worlds, and to stay really informed on the climate science and the impact side of things while also building out finance skills. So I came in not really understanding the finance landscape. Turns out it is very complex. There are a lot of different avenues to go down. So I spent last summer at a large alternative asset manager in more of the traditional finance space, doing decarbonization and ESG. This summer, this is one of the massive benefits of having 2 years of the program, is I'm able to test out a slightly different thesis. I'm able to go down a slightly different path, explore a different part of the space in a way that I would not be able to if I only had one summer. So this year I've started looking at earlier stage financing, so a lot of venture capital, climate specific investments, and kind of explore what that part of the finance sector looks like and figure out where both culturally, but also impact wise, I fit in best. So yeah, to Stu's question, it has been really helpful to be able to take the time to explore in multiple paths and to really get to know a landscape really well in a way that I don't necessarily think you can if you just have that one internship summer where you're trying to get an offer at the end of the summer.
Great, thanks. And Charlotte, can you build on that a bit in kind of that like why and the time that you've spent and what does it look like in your third year and how you see the kind of complements of the two between each other? Like what is that doing for you? What does that mean to you?
Yeah. Wow, big question. Well, just like stepping back in terms of like why I chose both and not just one, I do have an environmental background. And so for me, like the MBA, if I had to just pick one, it would have been the MBA. And I think for a lot of people, it depends on your background prior to wanting to come back to school. But one of the big factors for me was you get another year on campus, which might sound a little silly, but once you're here, you recognize like how many opportunities are available to you and how many resources are available to you. And I think having that, your first year, you're kind of just figuring out what's what, the landscape. And Stu kind of does like to talk about the sort of progression in the degree. And I think that so you kind of almost lose that whole first year when you're trying to get the lay of the land. And so by the third year, you understand everything that's happening and you have relationships and you can really dig in and take advantage of a lot of these things. And another big thing for me is kind of the blending of the cultures of the schools. I feel like among the YSC people, I tend to be a little more pragmatic. And then among the SOM people, I tend to be like a little more on like the social impact spectrum. And I think that's a lot people in the program or the joint degree program can like identify in that same space. And so it's nice to have a space for conversations and sort of this like pre-selected group of people who are likely to share that kind of orientation and approach to problem solving.
Yeah, and Colin, can you give people a sense of like, okay, what does it feel like to drink from the fire hose in your first year? And like, how do you kind of feel like this place could be, oh my goodness, there's so many opportunities. And then now in your second year, like, where are you settling on feeling like, oh, I'm getting into something that's really meaty and meaningful. And what is that?
Sure. I feel like I'm a good person to answer this question because the first year that I arrived, it is a fire hose. There's a million emails going out, a bunch of messages on Slack, a bunch of messages on WhatsApp, all with cool looking flyers of really interesting opportunities that you might want to do. There's volunteer opportunities coming out of YSE. There's the social impact consulting coming out of SOM. There's the board fellowships coming out of SOM. There's the research projects coming out of CBAE. There's the opportunities are just never ending. And it feels a little bit like if you don't figure out what you're doing in that first fall weeks that you're on campus, you like everybody's figuring something out. You've got to get what you need out of that kind of thing too. And so you're running. And then actually, I will forever be grateful to the joint degree program for this. I had coffee with a second year, I guess she's a third year now, Maria, and she sat me down and said, breathe, it's okay. Like, these opportunities don't stop coming. Yale's such a rich opportunity set that if you don't get everything right in your first 4 weeks on campus, you'll be fine. And that really helped give me a perspective to be selective about what I wanted to get involved in. And now in my second year, I did exactly that. I've got 2 things that I've said, all right, this is what I'm going to go deep on. One of those is a board fellowship with an organization called Gather New Haven that runs urban gardens across the city and runs some land trusts for some ecologically sensitive areas of the city. And then the other one is a research project through CBAE working on trying to understand the barriers, not just the financial barriers, but the cultural, the technical barriers for farmers trying to do agriculture more sustainably, both within the US and kind of in the global South. And being able to dig into those in a really, Stu, as you said, in like a meaty and deep way has been really nice, in that I've been able to tap into this huge network of people that probably would not return my email if I didn't have a yale.edu at the end, who all of a sudden are like, oh no, I would love to talk to you in detail about all of these cool things that we're doing. And being able to reach across Stu's network and the Research Partners Network and the networks of the people that we talk to and generate like this huge wealth of insights and synthesize that has been really rewarding.
Thanks, Colin. And Grace, could you describe, like, like Colin just mentioned sort of the value that Maria had in like a third year sitting down and like the culture of the joint degree community. Can you talk a little bit about like, what does the community do? How do we help each other? Like, what's the sort of support network look like? What's the vibe? What does it sort of feel like to be a part of?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it helps that it's a group of people who is all in the same set of unusual, slightly exceptional circumstances of, we have extra time, we have extra opportunity. And to Charlotte's point, we really sit at the intersection between those two schools. So I think a lot of the time in either school, you end up feeling like a little bit of, a medium place. You're a person who has just a little bit of extra academic information, but also life experience in either sector that you tend to bring to the table. And sometimes that is well received, sometimes that gets a little bit of pushback. But either way, it can be really difficult and challenging to sit at the intersection of those two places. And the joint degree community is such a welcoming and supportive group that is also going through the exact same experience. So I found it particularly helpful at the beginning of last year, starting at the School of Management, feeling like I had this really specific focus and not wanting to get lost in some of the banking and consulting shuffle that inevitably happens at business school. Being able to turn back to the joint degree community and have a group of people to lean on, both socially, but also academically and professionally, to say, I'm really nervous about, getting an internship. I'm really feeling stressed about these classes. I feel like I'm not talking about sustainability in my day-to-day life as much as I would like to be. How can I do that more? Having a group of people who've gone through the exact same experience is so invaluable and really unique. You don't get that very often in life, where you have a group of people who are all having a very similar experience with similar backgrounds and similar desires. And it's a really cool, unique social experience that has been enormously helpful in digesting everything that I'm learning, but also people bringing new opportunities to the table. Half of the cool things I hear about come from the joint degree community, and it gives you a little bit of a vetting system to be able to understand, okay, how important is this actually? Or did you go to this event last year? Was it really valuable? As to Colin's point, it is a fire hose. There's so much coming toward you. Having people who are interested in similar things too is really helpful in filtering, processing, digesting. It's one of the bigger perks of the joint degree as a whole.
Wonderful. Thanks. Charlotte or Colin, anything to add on that as well? I mean, that was a wonderful answer, Grace, in terms of giving a complete sense of what the joint degree community looks like. Is there anything that you'd like to supplement?
I think it's been brought up a little bit in both what Grace and Charlotte have talked about, but I'd like to say that YSE spends a lot of time talking about and teaching how the world should be. And the School of Management spends a lot of time talking and teaching about how the world is. And I think both of those perspectives are incredibly important to go out and be a fully equipped professional in whatever it is you want to do. And when you're in each of those schools, it's not impossible to avoid, but it's very easy to get caught up in whatever that perspective is. So you can become super pragmatic in your year at SOM, or you can become super idealistic in your year at YSE. And as Grace mentioned, like the joint community helps kind of shave off some of the rough edges of each of those perspectives and keep you in that kind of grounded and blended discussion that enriches both of the conversations you're having at both schools. And I found that really, really helpful.
Great. some pretty awesome questions coming in from the audience. Well done, you all. Congratulations. They're really good. So I want to get into a few of those as we keep going, and we can add in other things. We'll go through a bunch of the kind of like process and logistics ones a little bit toward the end of how the application elements work. One that people always ask about, and I think Charlotte, if you could touch on, is like, when you're thinking about the kind of like what you're doing post-graduation, like, can you describe that and like how this kind of was set up through the joint degree program? And then Colin and Grace, if you have like an inkling of an idea, like, all right, what do I hope to be doing afterwards? Like, love to touch on those as well. And then I'll also give a little sense of like, what have people done after the joint degree, which is a question that comes up of like, where are these people now and where can you find information about them? So Charlotte, can you kick us off on kind of like, what does the next step look like?
Yeah, definitely. So I took a strategy that I think a lot of people do, in that I was trying to do two pretty diverse things with my 2 different summers, because having a summer to kind of try something on is such a unique opportunity. And I also wanted to think about how I can be pivoting towards what I think I'm interested in. So my first summer, I interned in corporate sustainability at a semiconductor manufacturer, which is not agriculture, obviously, but is corporate sustainability. And they were doing a lot of work on political engagement as well, which is another one of my questions I'm interested in, like how can and should the private sector interact with democracy and government broadly. And so I was able to work on some projects in that vein with them as well. And then for my second summer, I sort of took notice of consulting firms really digging into sustainability. And that is a very traditional MBA path and a less traditional joint degree path, which means I'm sort of swimming upstream by doing something very conventional, which is an interesting place to be in. But I was at McKinsey in Minneapolis this summer, and I was able to network a lot with their sustainability partners and learn about how to get involved with that work and whether that fits into kind of my theory of change. And so I'm going to be going back there. I have signed a job offer with them, and I'm hoping to really use that to like bolster the skills that I'm learning at SOM in the short term. And then in the longer term, I want to move on to working in corporate sustainability at a food or agriculture company in the Midwest on sort of like the conventional large scale side.
Wonderful, thank you. And Grace or Colin, do you have any sense of kind of like where you want to go with this or where you want to do with it next?
Sure. So I'm just going to keep echoing, having the summer to try something on and not feel like that's your do or die summer is such a huge benefit. So I mentioned I was at Cargill for the summer thinking that I wanted to do food and ag sustainability at the big corporate player level. Ended up deciding that's not for me, not because I had some visceral reaction or really didn't like it. It's just the cultural fit wasn't there for me. I wanted something with a little bit more energy and a little bit more kind of maybe less work-life balance, which isn't technically healthy, but like wanted something that would challenge me a little bit more and push me a little bit more. And so similarly to Grace, I'm looking into moving into the finance space more specifically, but a very niche part of it that's working on sustainable agriculture. So there's a handful of funds out there or firms that are doing something like buying up exhausted conventional farms with poor soil health or overusing their water allocations and remediating those farms, helping them act more sustainably, working to make a longer term investment thesis that, hey, we really do believe that sustainable investing or sustainable agriculture is the answer long term. Let's put our money where our mouth is and make that happen. And so whether that's on the financing side or on the operations side, I'm still exploring, but doing that over the summer. And if I don't like that either, I've got another chance to go back and do my original plan before I came in, which is get into the nonprofit world at a much broader scale and say, hey, you know what, I was right 2 years ago and I should probably have stuck with that and let's do it. But I will know the answer to that question now. And that's something that the joint degree has been able to give me.
Yeah, I feel somewhat similar to Colin. My summer this past summer was actually exactly what I wrote that it would be in my MBA and YSE applications, which I think is somewhat unusual. But I almost to the letter, even going down to the level of specific firms that I mentioned in my application, had sort of a quote unquote dream first summer internship and liked it a lot, would think about going back 2 years from now, but it also brought up a lot of questions for me about the finance sector in general, our financial system, how the world works, how finance intersects with policy and the NGO and nonprofit space. And so I'm taking the next 2 years to explore that a little bit more and to sort of make my world bigger. I was looking at it through a very narrow lens of trying to get investors to push people to be more sustainable, but the climate space is so much more than that. And I hadn't really touched the climate space outside of the private sector. So like this year, for example, I'm going to COP27 in Egypt. I've been taking a class with one of the lead climate negotiators for the US over at the Jackson Policy School. Things like that have completely expanded my worldview and have really broadened my understanding of the climate space and where I could see myself in that space. So that is the opposite of the question you asked, Stu, because now I feel like my opportunities beyond school are bigger than I even knew that they were. But that feels really exciting. And I am really excited about figuring out how I can integrate more of the pieces that I'm collecting into what I want to do after school. And to Colin's point, if it ends up being what I thought I wanted to do at first, great. I will go in a more well-rounded and efficient person in that space, but I will have expanded my world and learned a lot in the process.
That's great. And I think, one common theme I hear too is like the testing and learning approach while you're in the joint degree and being able to understand where you as an individual would have the best impact inside of an organization or a sector or an area is pretty common. Whether you're taking an entrepreneurial path like Charlotte at like one of the biggest management consulting firms in the world to be able to kind of go in and work on a sustainability practice, or you're looking for something that's a little bit more bespoke in a different approach. We've seen joint degrees come out, and the head of the of CAISO that does like all the kind of electricity markets in California is a joint degree alum. The person who runs Amazon's climate pledge is a joint degree alum. The person who established the EDF's corporate partnerships program is a joint degree alum. The people who established Nature Vest and the nature-based investing are joint degree alumni at the Nature Conservancy. You've got the person who leads the business and sustainability initiative at Harvard at HBS is a joint degree alum, a tenured faculty member there. You've got like people in all sectors and areas who are kind of experimenting and have been at the forefront of kind of redefining or doing different things inside of large organizations or in smaller and kind of more nimble roles. So it really is an interesting blend of folks that have come through and done different things. We get a lot of questions here on kind of the elements of like the application process itself. So then we're talking about like what it looks like at the end, but like what does it look like right now for the people on the line who are applying, right? And so I'll just provide some context and overview here, and then I'd love for you all to dive into like your experience. So you apply to both schools independently, right? And you're in the application process, you'll check off and say, I'm also applying to the other school. So you indicate that you're applying to the other school as a joint degree, but you're applying to each separately. And then if accepted at both, hopefully, then you would join and become part of the joint degree community. But in the process, you're really thinking about each school and the value that they provide and that school provides independently, and then the connection between the two in the joint degree program. People then have certainly been waitlisted or not gotten in the first try at each school, and then reapply, and then they're accepted in their first year when they're at one of the other schools. So that's also a path that people take, which is a question that's come up here. But I'd love, can you all just touch on kind of any thoughts you have as people are getting ready to apply? Like, what should they think about in the admissions process in applying to both schools or considering those? And Charlotte, this is the foggiest in your memory since it's the furthest off, but like, what nuggets would you pull out that you'd say, like, looking at these two schools and applying to them, like, how do you go about it?
Great question. This is the foggiest in my mind. I'm trying to stay away from cliches like being authentic, but I do think that being authentic is important. So I wouldn't try to be something that you're not, and also knowing, kind of like leaning into a non-traditional background, perhaps in terms of either school. Like you are coming into YSC without an environmental background, or you're coming into SOM without a business background. Obviously being clear about like why you're like demonstrating your interest in like this pivot is important, but I think that you shouldn't be afraid to say like, yeah, this isn't my background, because that's, you know, why you're applying to this. So that's something to keep in mind.
Go ahead, Grace.
I can go next. I think that it can be a little bit scary to do exactly what Charlotte said, but I think really lean in to what your background is and what you're bringing to the table, because ultimately both schools are professional schools. They're trying to curate a class of people with a wide range of backgrounds, a large diversity of backgrounds, that will bring something to the table and that will start interesting conversations. And one of the huge value adds of being in programs like this are the moments when other students raise their hands and say, well, I was in this industry before. And I mean, I cannot count the number of times that professors have been a little bit lost in an answer or have been searching for some real world experience, and somebody in your classroom will raise their hand and have the most niche, perfect experience that you never would have thought would have helped them on an MBA application, but here it is coming up in the classroom. So I think really lean into what you bring to the table, even if that is really different than what you think the program is looking for, because ultimately the program is looking for a range of experiences and diversity. So really lean into what your strengths are. And then beyond that, I think be just as specific as you can be about both what you're bringing to the table, but also what you're looking for. I think that sometimes people get a little lost in big phrases, like I am trying to mitigate climate change, but be really specific about what that means and how you want to use this program to do that.
Cool. That's great. Thanks.
And I'd add one thing. Don't think too much about tailoring your application or narrative to each school and trying to tell each school what they individually want to hear. One of the things that if you're thinking about this program, I assume it's because there's a common thread that runs between your desire to go to each school, and playing that up really well would help strengthen and one, just in your brain, which application am I working on? Oh, it doesn't really matter. I'm answering the same questions on each one, but also helps give the admissions committee kind of a fuller picture of what you're going for, right? I don't think I would have gotten half of the value out of only doing one of the schools, right? The two together was more than the sum of their parts. And writing the application with that in the back of my brain helped me kind of speak, to Charlotte's point, more authentically, as cliche as that is, because you're telling the narrative in a much more stronger voice than if you were just trying to say, okay, let me silent myself over at YSE and let me silent myself over at SOM. Trying to unify that story in the way that you present yourself to each school is really helpful.
Great, thanks. And just some kind of technical bits as well. So you only interview at the School of Management in the application process. The School of the Environment, there's no interview that's associated with that. Any other things that are specific about these? And there's typically, like, as you see the folks on the screen here, like most of the folks in the joint degree have about 4 to 5 years of professional experience somewhere in there when they're coming in. That's typically the kind of sweet spot with the School of Management and the School of the Environment that's there. Some come from backgrounds where they've been working on the environment and some do not. So there's, everybody's coming to a master's degree a lot of times for transition or a career change. So there are elements where the School of the Environment in particular looks for people who've had experience or dedication to working on environmental issues in some aspect of their career prior to it. They want to see that there's a leadership element associated with that, but that can be demonstrated in different ways. So it's not just doesn't have to be in the career path that you've chosen prior to coming to school. There's I mentioned a few of the alumni that are out there that are working in different areas. Could you all talk about your experience? As a question that comes up of like, how have you engaged with alumni from the joint degree community or from the School of the Environment and the School of Management during your time at Yale? Like, how have they been connected or support to you during the kind of journey you've been on?
Sure, I can take that first. So I think there's a couple distinct ways. One is just trying to figure out what the heck I wanted to do with my career. There's the visiting alumni mentors that CBAE hosts, and they're incredibly accessible. A lot of them have links on their website where you can just put an invite on their calendar. You don't even have to go through the introduction email process because they're so happy to talk to people. They're like, yeah, absolutely, open door policy. And so when I was trying to figure out, what are my hypotheses for what I want to do with my 2 summers, how do I think about shaping my overall career search? Just picking their brains. And it sounds, I'm an introvert. I don't like reaching out to people. And so the level of access and friendliness that helps break down that barrier was incredible. And then also, I've alluded to this research project that we're running through the Regenerative Agriculture Initiative at CBAE. Having the alumni who are in the space and who are already thinking about these questions sit us down and say, look, I took a look at your initial list of questions. Here's some good stuff that you're thinking about. Here's a bunch of stuff that you're going to reveal yourself to be total neophytes when you talk to people in the space. Think about kind of upping your game a little bit in these ways and digging into these questions a little bit more deeply. Having them be a low risk way to do that first pass on kind of the things we wanted to learn was also incredibly helpful in getting up to speed on our research questions much more quickly than if we'd taken the more traditional cold call route. We've talked about how welcoming and open the joint degree community is at school. It extends throughout the whole time, after school too.
Charlotte?
A lot of what I was going to say, Colin covered, but I guess just continuing on that theme of like the close-knit nature of the community, I feel like there's something psychologically about being a little bit different from other people that makes you like closer. And I think that continues as people get out into the professional world. A lot of people are doing these more niche things. And so I think those 2 factors of like having this common experience, but also this like common orientation is something that really knits folks together. And I will just underscore what Colin said about like the accessibility of these folks. They have, you can just sign up as Colin said, but also like people like Stu have this like encyclopedic knowledge of the whole like maybe not the whole 30 years Stu, but like often, all these examples that Stu is rattling off, like he knows and he can like connect you to these folks. So there are multiple avenues to get in touch and people are willing to talk.
Just as a kind of a backdrop on that too, like relationships are a form of wealth that needs to be shared. Like the only way we're going to transform the systems is if we fix the way that we engage with each other too. And so like we have to be kind of like open and welcoming and connected to each other in ways, if we're going to solve complex problems, that like we have very small parts of bigger solutions that are potentially interconnected. And if we don't spend the time figuring out, and people don't have that generosity to figure it out, like we're not going to put things together, particularly on things that are as complex as climate change or climate crisis or, like toxicity in the ocean or anything that you would think about that you would care about, or the types of agricultural issues that people have talked about here. Like we have to respect and understand each other and be thoughtful with each other. Sorry, that's a little soapboxy, but like that's just sort of a part of the ethos, I think, around this place. Okay, so Grace, do you have anything to add there, or do you want to touch on something else?
Yeah, I was just going to say, sort of anecdotally, I think that Charlotte and Colin covered a lot of the big stuff, but Stu, to your point, I had exactly that happen in New York this summer. I got in touch with a joint degree who graduated back in 2018, and because we had this really incredible shared foundation of social background, but also common interests, our conversation went so far beyond the average coffee chat conversation, and we ended up talking for 3 hours about the morality of the financial system. And it's just a deeper connection to alums than you get most places, because you do have such a solid shared foundation of common interests and common social patterns, things like that.
Uh, and sort of things that stand out. I'd love to hear kind of like some of the anecdotes of like what's in terms of the impact that the time at Yale has had thus far. You know, whether it's a class or a project or kind of an area of personal or professional growth. Could each of you just describe something that like it's certainly something that's coming up in the questions of like what's something that sort of stands out for you thus far in the experience?
I can kick it off. In my first year through a YSE-sponsored research program that focuses on conservation in the West, like the Western states of the US, I did a project with this medium to large, depending on your perspective, farm in Montana that has these like beyond organic, super sustainable practices. And the question was, how do we reduce risk from their perspective as a business? And like, who can we partner with and what are some strategies? So I worked with one other joint degree and then one YSE student. We were like Zooming weekly with this farmer, and like that in itself was interesting, just like hearing about what was going on in her life every week for a year. But that was a highlight and provided me an opportunity to integrate a lot of things I've been studying and questions I have. So that was really great.
Grace, do you have a highlight?
Yeah, I can go next. So last year, my first year-long project was getting involved in an early stage impact investing competition, where we sourced and diligenced an early stage climate startup and were able to work with the founder the entire year to diligence their business. And then at the end of the year, we acted as though we were pitching to a VC, and we were able to go in front of a board, some of whom were an actual impact investor that are based in the UK, and pitch this company sort of as if it was our own for a genuine investment of $50,000. And it was such a cool world expanding experience. To Colin's point earlier about people just being willing to say yes and to chat if you have that yale.edu email address, this was the ultimate example of that, where we were reaching out to industry experts, and it was a sort of a carbon capture sequestration mixed with a concrete company. And we were able to reach out to concrete experts, major VC leaders, and just talk to them about this company. And they were willing to sit down and chat just because we were students who were trying to learn. So I think that was probably the best example of just doors being wide open to being able to talk to all sorts of experts and really dive deep into a space in a neat way.
And just to call it out, Grace and her team won this competition. So like that, I want to make sure she gets credit for that. So I think on my end, I'll take a much more informal one, but I remember a joint degree pizza party that we had where the joint degrees all have gone in on a pizza oven, and every once in a while we'll break it out and host a make your own pizza night. And sitting on the front porch in New Haven, eating pizzas and getting deep in conversation around what does it mean to be a landowner? What does it mean to engage in a system that's much broader than yourself? And kind of how do you think about producing the food that we're eating now? What does that mean given that we're far more affluent than most of the world just by rights of living in the US? And how do we think about cheap food, meaning that you can spend money on education, versus cheap food, meaning you're destroying the planet in a lot of cases? And like one of those spiraling conversations that Grace alluded to when she was in New York is why I'm looking at the kinds of things that I'm looking at for a career, and really shaped how I view the world and think about my place in it. It's not professional. It's not, I could talk more about my research project or some of the projects I'm doing for my classes at Yale, but I think that one stands out as an incredible highlight for realizing there's a community of people that are thinking about questions that weren't even well formed in my brain before I had these conversations.
Cool. That's great. We have about 10 minutes left. I wanted to just like throw it out to you. Are there things that we haven't talked about or asked that you're like, oh, we've got to get this to the people who are considering this program right now? Like, what are the sort of things that feel like haven't been touched on in the conversation yet that would be really important for a person who's in the midst of the application process?
I know, Stu, that we're supposed to be selling the program, but I have seen some questions about like, if I can't do this, like what are my other options? And I think that is like a good thing to touch on, and an advantage of Yale as a whole, but either YSE or SOM, that they're both very flexible in terms of allowing you to access other schools, even beyond the two schools I mentioned. There's also the Jackson Institute, which Grace mentioned. They focus on international affairs. And so you can take pretty freely classes at these other schools while still being enrolled. So if you end up enrolling at YSE, you can go over to SOM. In fact, it's just like a block away. And so you constantly see this like physical like exchange between these two schools. And there are actually a lot of classes that are cross-listed between SOM and YSE. I'm taking one about energy systems right now that is maybe a third SOM and 2/3 YSE. So there are definitely opportunities, even if you don't get in or decide that for whatever reason it's not the right thing for you.
Great, thanks for that. Grace, or Colin, other things we haven't touched on that you feel like we should?
I'd build on that a little bit. I've had a couple conversations with people who are trying to decide, should I do what Charlotte just kind of mentioned, which is apply to one school and then opportunistically take classes across the street or at other schools. And I would say if you're really confident and like you have a very targeted sense of what you want to do, and I'm here for a very transactional reason, this will unlock this specific opportunity that will allow me to do this specific thing that I already know about, that's a good idea, right? Saves you a year, saves you tuition, and gives you the tools that you need. Like I would never dissuade someone from that. But I had no idea. I thought I was that person when I applied, and joining the joint degree community made me realize there's a much, much broader universe of ideas and things to grapple with and work on. That had I had kind of that transactional view of my 2 years of like a personally 2-year degree, I might have missed out on. And so that's how I would think about the calculus between, do I only apply to one or do I try and apply to both?
Yeah, my piece of advice I think would be a little bit apart from that and more application specific, but I think it's really important as you're going through the application process to really visualize yourself in the space and in one or both of the programs that you're applying to, and really think about exactly what clubs would I be in, exactly what student organizations do I want to do, what conferences do I want to go to, what case competitions am I interested in, and be really specific about those in your application and your interview process. It goes by really fast. And I mean, we have 3 years, we have an extra year on most people, and it feels like it flies by. So being able to be really specific about it in your application, I think is really helpful, and I think sets you apart a little bit, but also being able to hit the ground running and say, I know what I want to do, at least to start out with. Of course, your world is going to get so much bigger very quickly, and there will be things you didn't even know you were interested in that you should be open to. But just in those first few weeks of school, having things to anchor yourself to say, I know I, as a person, am interested in XYZ, was really, really helpful for me personally. And I think can be really helpful in avoiding some of that sense of, oh no, I'm 3 months into the semester and I'm overcommitted and I don't know what I really want to do and what's really important to me. So try to think about it as much as possible before you actually get here, because it goes really, really fast.
Yeah, and when people get here, there's one question just on another like technical side of people choose, as we mentioned, either school to join. So Charlotte chose to start at the School of the Environment. Colin and Grace chose to start at the School of Management. You can pick either one based on kind of what you were doing before and what you wanted to work on, right? Like where you sort of wanted to begin that process and what you want to dig into. Like you're adults, you should have choice over where you start and how it works and like what you want to explore. And so you have to make a lot of that. And I think, a common theme is like balancing time and being able to understand there's more opportunity that's out there than you could possibly take advantage of, and setting up these filters that get you into the right positions to explore meaningful questions over your time at Yale is a really important part of the process, and being able to say, I can't do everything. And I'm going to trust that Grace is going to do these things, and Charlotte's going to do these things, and Colin's going to do these things, and we're all going to be better off together when that happens, and people have a sense of what we're doing on, you know, on an overall sense, and people can get really deep and geeky on an individual topic or area that they care a lot about. We just have about 5 minutes left here. In the chat, I dropped in some more information about where you can get kind of more info on the joint degree program. There's a specific site on CBAE where you can explore the joint degree program. You can dig into the bios of some of the people who you see on this, and then the broader community of folks in the joint degree and what that path looks like. You can also see some profiles of alumni there. I'd really encourage people that if you want, sign up for the CBAE weekly newsletter. You can do that on our site, and that'll give you a little bit of a rhythm and the pacing of some of the things that are out there. Incomplete, because there's so much more than just what we do at the Center for Business and the Environment, but it'll at least give you some of that kind of like what's happening on a weekly basis, the types of opportunities that are there, the things to explore. There's career guides that you can find on our site in clean energy, corporate sustainability, in sustainable food and ag, that'll give you profiles and understanding of some of those alumni that we've talked about. And then the admissions offices are wonderful sources of information on all those kind of questions that you might have on, do I take the GMAT? You have to, what do I do? How do I take the tests? What do the profiles of people look like, when I'm considering the application process? I just like to really thank Charlotte, Colin, Grace for the time. I really appreciate you all just for making your time available and offering the insight to the folks who are on the line chatting with us. You all have Grace, you have 30 seconds of final message to all the folks out there in the ether who are considering this. Like, what do you have as pearls of wisdom?
Yeah, I think this is the most incredible community, such an amazing opportunity. But either way, just the fact that you're here, the fact that you're interested in this space means that you are engaging in something so, so important to modern society, to future generations. So I'm really excited that you're all here and that you're all pursuing this in whatever form you decide to pursue it in, whether that is here, which I hope that it is, but wherever you end up going, we're all in it together.
Cool. Colin, I'll give Charlotte the last word on this, and she's our most senior member.
Here. To what Grace said, I think that was awesome. Good luck on the applications. Trying to come up with something better than a cliche, but Charlotte's right. Like the authentic. Don't try and tailor your application. Talk about who you are and what you want to do. That's going to be your best recipe for success. As annoying as it is to hear that from everybody on these kind of panels.
I guess I would say, as I read the paper every morning, it becomes clearer and clearer how urgent all of the questions and the things that we're studying here are, and so connected to the real world. And we need people who are working on all kinds of solutions. So wrapping up what Grace and Colin have said in one single thing, we be authentic to the thing that you are best at and excites you, whether you know that already or you're coming here to find that. I think that's the key to sustainable work in personally sustainable work and impactful work in these spaces. So I wish that all for you.
Thank you. Well, appreciate you all being with us, and look forward to answering any questions you may have. Feel free to reach out to us as you're going through the application process. You can find our information on the CBAE site, and please sign up for any of the resources and information that we have to kind of keep you informed about what's going on here at Yale. And thanks for spending your time with us this morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're coming in from in the world. And hopefully we'll see you all here soon.